First, very seriously, more than 100 schools up and down our country are being ordered to close part or all of their facilities because they were built with a dodgy type of concrete that literally can't handle exposure to moisture and only has a lifespan of about 30 years. And I'll say that again. These are schools that were signed off to use this bootleg imitation of concrete up until the 90s. They were only given the news on Friday. Check this. 156 schools are confirmed to use the material. A further 400 institutions could be affected, putting, it's unbelievable, 700,000 pupils at risk, our kids, of being crushed. Now, yesterday, the Education Secretary Gillian Keegan raised eyebrows when she posted a video about the crisis, unbelievably set to blaring dance music. But that was just the warm-up, my friends, for what can only be described as a monumental car crash interview this afternoon. This is not a comedy sketch. This is the lady that is in charge of education. Take a look.
But we will get a plan, and every single one of them will be done.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
Wow. Joined now by an executive head teacher with over 40 years of experience, Serge Cefai. Serge, welcome to Jeremy Kyle Live.
Jeremy.
Why now? And can you explain to me about this? Because it's appalling. Was this concrete always known to be problematic? Because these schools were built in the 60s, is that right?
Yeah, they knew then that it had a short lifespan, i.e. 30, 40 years. But I think you've used the words, unbelievable. And it just opens the window to how incompetent some of our public services are. Where's the plan? Where's the strategy? This should have been passed on from one government to another. I know we've had 7 education secretaries in the last 5 years. What the hell do they talk about? And if not making sure that our kids can go to school safely isn't top of the list, then I don't know what is.
I mean, in my mind today, when I heard this and over the weekend, Serge, and I guess you probably agree, you think of the pandemic, you think about kids who were basically out of the classroom, stuck on their own, maybe with a Zoom if they were lucky. You think about that, and now at the point where, yes, they might just be about to go back to school, they might be excluded again. You said that the government, and of course it's very easy to say it's this government, but this was, what, 60 years ago? And are you telling me that prime ministers and education secretaries in the last 60 years didn't know that this wasn't a ticking time bomb? It's a disgrace, man.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. But as I said, I'm not sure the political class, and as far as I'm concerned, they're all involved, and once again, we've seen it already today. The Conservatives are playing it down, thinking they've sorted it out. The Labour Party are trying very hard to blame the Conservatives. And all the while, there are kids in the middle here not getting educated again. And I don't know what to say or do. I feel so sorry for those head teachers who now are having to make arrangements. I've decanted a school. That was absolute hell. And I had notice of doing that. Some of these head teachers are going to have to do it within a matter of days. I don't know what to say apart from be really upset again with our systems, but I think we've got to depoliticize some of these more important factors of our society because they can't cope, Jeremy. They're too busy playing politics and forgetting about the people they're supposed to be representing.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And you bring it back to 700,000 kids. Now, we can't be specific, and I get that about where you work and all that, but what we're saying is, in September, maybe the day or a week or a few days before the kids are due to return, are you telling me that head teachers were just informed of this? Had head teachers got knowledge of these problems in the past or not?
Well, I can tell you now, I assume that my building is safe because it's been built and it's been signed off by local authority, etc., etc., etc. And I want to concentrate on teaching the kids.
Yeah.
And what are the next set of initiatives that we have to bring in to make sure we maximise the outcome for them? I'm not a builder. Head teachers aren't. Obviously, we see the obvious. We get it checked every year. But this will be out of the remit of, I would suggest, 99.9% of all heads. And those having to deal with it now. And, of course, those parents who now have to take time off work because maybe their kids are in primary, it's once again, it's shades of the cock-ups that they'd made during lockdown. And this time there's even fewer excuses because they've known about it for decades. Not years, decades.
And that's the point, isn't it? It would be easy.
Anything about it.
It would be easy in so many of these instances to look at our government and go, look, it's underfunding. This is 60 years of sweeping something under the carpet, which, apart from essentially maybe ensuring that kids are excluded yet again from an education on the back of the pandemic, is a risk to life. I mean, I'm sorry to sound like, I've been off and I'm like, does this mean that politicians do not have any foresight? Are we saying yet again, a bit like we talk about immigration, we talk about the Home Office, we talk about the NHS, nobody really gives a toss for their 5 years. They're just trying to say and do things that get them re-elected. Nobody has, foresight to look forward, Serge.
Well, if I'd run my schools, and I dare say if you ran your programme the way these people tend to run our national institutions, we would have got the boot a long, long time ago. And of course, I'm really glad you're highlighting this, because the one factor that isn't clear still, never mind the fact we're saying it's disgraceful, unexplainable, etc. Who's going to fund it?
Yeah.
So far, we've already got them arguing. We can't afford, head teachers who are involved in this, they cannot afford more money out of their budgets. They're already small enough. There's still not 100% guarantee. They do all the talk, the government. I've been around too long to know, the 6.5 pay rise. I'll be shocked if the 100% of that is paid through central funds. So please keep talking about this until we know exactly where the money's going to come from to rebuild or put this right.
Serge Cefai, always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Executive Head Teacher. Thanks for joining us on JK Live. The panel are in. Head of News at the News Moment, Rebecca Hudson. Hello.
Hello.
Former Labour advisor Frankie Leach has just dropped her dinner down her front. And Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. We were talking off air, Frankie. I'm coming straight to you because you quite surprised me about this. Because what will happen is, quite rightly, parents will go, what the hell? Quite rightly, people will look at the government. Rishi Sunak comes out and says, not my problem. You've nailed this.
Yeah, well, I mean, the issue here is that this is a failure of local authority. So really, this is about local government. Whoever the local government minister at the moment for the Conservatives is getting quite an easy ride, I think, compared to Gillian Keegan. And it's one of those things, it's that mask-off moment where she was swearing in that clip. You can tell when someone's frustrated, sounds a bit like the buck's been passed to her, and it's not really her responsibility because, as we've said, it's gone on for 60 years now. But the point still remains, how did this go on for so long? Because presumably there were some safety assessments for them to be able to work out how long the concrete lasted.
Well,
so why was it even put in schools in the first place?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Benedict, I was told, right, when I came in and I saw that 90s figure, I thought they were built in the 90s, not safe by 2020. These schools were built in the 60s, so we've had a ticking time bomb for 30 years, and no politician has had the foresight to go, we need to sort this out.
The reason why the material was chosen was because it was the cheapest. That's quite literally why it was chosen. And I'm afraid that this, as you were sort of touching on just there, with all the many issues that we look at in this country and we think, where was the foresight? It is one of very many examples where we like to think in this country that we're sort of modern, we're forward-thinking, all of these things, and that standards are good. And actually, it's never about that in this country. It is always about trying to get the best, that is to say, the cheapest deal. And I have to say, it is particularly galling given that any society that wants to be a prosperous society has to look not to its healthcare system or anything else, it's its education system first and foremost. What have we done over the last couple of years? We've absolutely wrecked the experiences of so many students and pupils, both at universities and schools, plunging students into huge amounts of debts, ruining the education experience of lots of children. And now just to add to this, I mean, it's rather poetic if it wasn't so awful. Quite literally, the poor decisions of older generations could crash down upon the younger generations. You know, you couldn't think of a better message.
Let me read this. I mean, I'm not a concrete expert, reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, RAAAC, is a lightweight material that was used mostly in flat roofing, but also in floors and walls between the 50s and the 90s. It's bubbly like an aero chocolate bar, in effect, can retain moisture when water gets in. It is less durable than actual concrete and has a lifespan of 30 years. Now, let's not make it political for once, because we're all going to go, oh, Gillian Keegan lost her whatever, quite like what Frankie said. This has been going on since the 60s. So if we want to blame Thatcher or nobody's gone. Our kids could literally be crushed to death.
Yeah. I mean, I think Serge is right. You know, we should depoliticise this issue. That, you know, ultimately the problem here is that, 700,000 children were going to school in unsafe structures. And also, we don't know whether this extends beyond just schools. I'm sure there are equally concerns about courts, prisons, hospitals, social housing, you know, any kind of state infrastructure where this concrete was used, to Benedict's point, you know, it was a cost-saving measure. You know, it was potentially leaving us all at risk. I would say, however, that I don't think Gillian Keegan has exactly covered herself in glory.
No.
I think downplaying the issue at the weekend with that stupid video video like she was in fabric was really a bad idea. And then today kind of losing her rag, like she wants someone to say thank you. Like it might not be directly her fault, but this is her brief. And Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, did slash the budget for repairs for schools and these sorts of structures. So there is some responsibility with the government.
Let's just look at it. I take your point, by the way. Let's take a look at, and I repeat this as I said at the top of the show, this is the Education Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, the person who's in charge of your kids' education. This is how she initially responded. This is why she's getting a load of hassle, and quite rightly. Look at this appalling video.
Problems with the strength and durability of the material mean that some buildings may pose a threat to safety, and nothing is more important than the health and safety of children and staff.
Sorry, now, I know I obviously annoy a lot of people, but can you please, all of you, who said, I mean, is she advised by the same idiots that advise Harry and Meghan? Who went that that's a good look? Who went that was a good idea?
I'm going to put my hand up as a former advisor here, and I just think they just were not thinking. It's just so bizarre. I wonder if they gave it to the social media person and just said, can you just find a backing track
it seems to be
for
a
this
theme,
clip?
doesn't it? They weren't thinking, they weren't thinking, they weren't thinking, and that's how you end up in a situation like this.
But it's just like, that's bad political comms, right? Because the strategic comms in you says that music should be sombre, it should be serious, and to put a dance track over
and what she's saying, nothing to see here, don't worry, really isn't the message, is it? It's 700,000
I would just like to bring
children.
this back very quickly to something that Becca said, and that is that it's not just schools that we're talking about. We're talking about schools right now because the school year has just started. The one that really sort of stuck out to me when I was reading a lot, which buildings could be effective. Courts and prisons. Now, you can put children in a field, in a gazebo, you can move them into school hall to teach them, you can set up field hospitals for people in hospitals. It's not, neither of those things are great, but you can do that. Where do you put prisoners if prisons start crumbling? We're already at maximum capacity. Anyway, where do you try people in a safe and secure area if courts are unusable? That is, that's actually rather terrifying.
It is, I mean, I say it almost nightly on this show. You get to a point where you think, what the hell has happened to our country? Just very quickly, and I'll be told I've got to move on. During the pandemic, wasn't that the moment to rebuild all these schools? Was that not a good idea?
There's no money, though. They have reduced public spending to pennies at this point. And now what's happening is the government is reaping the rewards of the seeds that it's sown, which is a critical underfunding of the public sector, and who suffers?
These
the
were
public.
built 60 years ago, though.
Yeah, but that's the point. It's
some comments.
Funding.
Some comments. More than 100 schools are being ordered to close over to safety fears. It's about funding, with billions being spent on foreign aid, HS2 and housing migrants. You won't like this. Should we be focusing on keeping our kids safe at school? You'd understand that. June, it's about time we concentrated on our own country and our kids, full stop. Jim, investing in the next generation is paramount. The fact this has been overlooked for so long, no time spending plan, is almost criminal. I have an idea. Why not use hotels to host school lessons and kick the migrants out? Jana, what on earth can you say? How can you say no to this question? Children need to be safe at school. A, B. Any and every excuse to close schools. Why now, after the holidays? 96% of people questioned said children should be at the forefront of any planning by any government. Listen, and you're right, let's just finish it by saying it should be depoliticised. Well, I can't say the word. Because actually, at the end of the day, we surely owe it to our kids, whatever the government of the day, don't we? Outrageous. Next